On my 60th birthday there were no warm wishes, no joyful celebrations, just chaos. My husband Robert saw me as a nuisance and my son Daniel cared only about money. They didn't even bother to save me a single bite of the cake I had made with my own hands. And when I finally said the words, "I want a divorce," they laughed. "You're 60, Mom. No savings, no retirement fund. Where could you possibly go?" They thought I would back down. But in the end, not only did I divorce Robert, but I also claimed what was rightfully mine. With my best friend Liz, I embarked on a brand new life. I hit the road, filmed short videos, and unexpectedly became an online sensation, earning more money than they had in a lifetime. And as for Robert, who once believed I couldn't survive without him, he ended up sick and alone. As for Daniel, the son who had shown me nothing but indifference, he was stunned when he found out how much I was making, but by then all he could do was regret. They said I'd come to regret my decision. But here I stand on the side of the highway, the sun warm on my face, the wind whipping through my hair, carrying nothing but freedom. 60? So what? My life is only just beginning. Mom, you're 60. Why are you talking about divorce? Can't you just live out the rest of your life in peace? I sat silently on the couch, staring at the wreckage around me. Broken dishes, toppled chairs, remnants of the birthday cake I had so carefully prepared. Daniel stood before me, seething. "If you divorce Dad, what will Emily's family think of me? Can't you stop being so selfish?" Selfish? I had been gone for 7 hours today. Not once had my husband or my son called to check on me. In the bitter December wind of San Francisco, my coatless body had shivered from the cold. And now that I was back, was I met with concern? No, only blame. "Mom, you ran away from home over a stupid birthday party? Dad and I ate the meal you cooked, didn't we? What more do you want?" Robert rose from the couch, his voice dripping with disdain. "So, you finally realized you've got nowhere else to go? Quit standing around and clean this mess up. And your shoes, leaving them everywhere, making the place filthy. You've ruined my whole damn day." I looked at him, my fingers unconsciously tightening around the hem of my sweater. Not once did they acknowledge that today was my birthday. Not once did they care that I had wandered the freezing streets for hours. Not once did they ask if I was okay. They didn't care. About anything. And the cruelest part? They had forgotten. They were the ones who had overturned the table and thrown me out. I lowered my gaze to my wrinkled hands. A chill settled deep into my bones. "You really think this is a good life?" Daniel's face darkened. He exhaled sharply, his tone slightly softened. "Come on, Mom. It's late. Everyone made mistakes today. Let's just drop it, okay?" I took a deep breath, my voice calm and unwavering. "I want a divorce." His expression shifted in an instant, his eyes flashing with disbelief. Robert shot up from his seat, jabbing a finger at me, his face twisting in fury. "Divorce? Fine. But where the hell do you think you're gonna go? You're 60. No savings, no pension. How are you gonna survive without me?" Daniel scoffed. "Yeah, Mom. I just started working. I can't afford to support you. Yesterday I might have locked myself in the bathroom and wept in silence. But today I just felt numb. You don't have to worry about me. I'll be just fine. I just want out." 30 years of marriage. No job. Every penny under Robert's control. And every word out of his mouth sharper than a knife. "If it weren't for me, you'd be homeless. Look at yourself, short, plain, can't even cook properly. An old woman like you. No one would want you but me." Once I would have swallowed the pain and told myself to endure. But tonight I simply met his gaze. Silent. Unmoved. Robert hadn't expected me to show no reaction. He faltered, his anger momentarily caught in his throat before he slumped back onto the couch, face dark with frustration. Daniel still couldn't understand. "Mom, seriously? Over a birthday? Is that really worth all this?" He let out a sigh, rubbing his temples. "Fine. Then how about I throw you a party tomorrow? Will that make you happy?" I looked down at the shattered remains of my birthday cake. Was it really about the birthday? Maybe. But it was also so much more than that. Last week, Daniel suddenly told me he wanted to throw me a birthday party. I could hardly believe it. In 60 years, this was the first time someone had ever suggested celebrating my birthday. I was so thrilled that I couldn't sleep properly for days, constantly thinking about what to prepare. I started looking up recipes 3 days in advance, planning to make something special. I didn't want to disappoint my son. When my best friend Liz heard about it, she called me, her voice full of confusion. Wait, you're making the food yourself for your own birthday party? I couldn't help but laugh. Should I ask Robert and Daniel to cook? Those two have never stepped foot in the kitchen. If I relied on them, it would probably be more trouble than just doing it myself. Liz wouldn't let it go. Then why not eat out? What kind of birthday person has to cook for themselves? I sighed. We're not as well off as you guys. Daniel's getting married soon. Everything costs money. I'm a 60-year-old woman. It's not like I need to go to a fancy restaurant to celebrate. When Liz heard this, she immediately offered to pay for everything so I could enjoy the day. I kept refusing, and only after some coaxing did she reluctantly give in. Honestly, I didn't care how the birthday was celebrated. As long as they remembered, I would be happy. This was the first real birthday I'd ever had in 60 years, and it was Daniel who had initiated it. I was so happy that I couldn't even sleep. At 4:30 in the morning, I got up to start preparing. I moved quietly, careful not to wake Robert. But he still stirred, frowning as he glared at me. Did I wake you? I asked, a little embarrassed but with a hopeful glimmer in my heart. After more than 30 years of marriage, I had hoped the first words he would say to me when he opened his eyes would be, "Happy birthday." But instead he just turned over and lazily muttered, "Why are you making a fuss so early? If you're not going to sleep, can't you at least let someone else sleep? Can't you be more considerate?" I was stunned. I froze for a few seconds, then remained silent. After all, it was my birthday and I didn't want to argue. I tried to shake off my disappointment and headed to the store, buying Daniel's favorite steak and potatoes. I worked non-stop from morning till noon, turning the house into a warm and tidy place. By 11, Daniel finally returned home. As soon as I heard the door unlock, I quickly removed my apron and rushed to greet him. I wondered if he'd come through the door holding a gift saying, "Mom, happy birthday." But his hands were empty. Just yesterday he had posted several photos of earrings on social media and asked in the comments, "Which pair do you think would be good for Mom?" A chill ran through me and my smile froze. Daniel noticed my expression and furrowed his brows. "What's wrong, Mom? Don't you look happy to see your son?" I forced a smile. "Of course I'm happy. Why wouldn't I be?" But I couldn't help myself and asked, "Aren't you going to give me a gift for my birthday? I saw you asking people yesterday which earrings would be best for Mom." He actually laughed. "Mom, you didn't think the earrings were for you, did you? I'm going to Emily's house tomorrow and I'm planning to give them to her mom." I froze. "That gift wasn't even for me." He went on, "Mom, you've always been frugal. You don't need things like this. Besides, Emily's mom is beautiful. Jewelry looks better on her. You're more suited to a kitchen apron." He paused, then added with a grin, "Or maybe I should get you some dishwashing gloves instead. How's that?" He genuinely thought I didn't deserve a bouquet of flowers. I looked down at the sink where I was washing vegetables. The water reflected a face full of wrinkles, sagging skin at the corners of my eyes, and more white hairs woven into my locks. In my son's eyes, I was nothing like Emily's mom. I didn't deserve to receive a thoughtful gift. I had spent the entire day preparing a birthday feast. 8 dishes, every single one of them Daniel's favorites. Appetizers, steak, roasted vegetables, and even a big pot of New England clam chowder that I had painstakingly learned to make just for the occasion. I had even researched plating techniques to make sure everything looked perfect. As Robert passed by the kitchen, he glanced at the table and scoffed. "Is all this really necessary? It's just a birthday." I ignored him and kept working. This was the first real birthday of my life. I wanted it to be worth remembering. By the time I placed the final dish on the table and wiped the flour from my hands, I was filled with anticipation. I picked up the small cake I had made for myself, ready to finally sit down and enjoy the moment. But then I froze. The table was nearly empty. The food I had spent all morning preparing had been devoured, leaving nothing but scraps. Daniel glanced at the cake in my hands and frowned. "Mom, that's it? You spent all this time and this is all you made for yourself?" A chill crept into my heart as I turned to look at Robert, only to find the same expression of impatience on his face. But this was my birthday. My first real birthday. I wanted to at least look back on it and remember something happy. Forcing a smile, I tried to joke, "Hey, wasn't this supposed to be my celebration? The birthday girl hasn't even sat down, and you two have already stuffed yourselves full. I thought it was harmless. Just a light-hearted remark. But Robert's expression darkened instantly. He slammed his fork onto the table and glared at me. What the hell is that supposed to mean? Daniel hardly comes home and now you're saying he shouldn't eat. I was stunned. I quickly tried to explain. I was just joking. But Robert's voice only grew louder, his tone dripping with anger. Joking? 60 years old and still running your mouth without thinking. How can someone be this stupid their whole damn life? His words were like a dull knife, pressing deep into my chest. I opened my mouth but nothing came out. Helplessly I turned to Daniel. He simply waved a hand dismissively. Forget it, Dad. It's Mom's birthday. Let's not argue. Robert fell into an uneasy silence, his expression still cold. The only sound left in the room was the clinking of utensils against plates. Lowering my gaze, I picked up my fork and tried to take a bite of my cake. But then Daniel spoke again. Mom, where's that emerald bracelet? The one Grandma left you. I hesitated, my hand trembling slightly around the fork. Daniel's eyes locked onto mine, a hint of urgency in his gaze. I've looked for it a few times but couldn't find it. Bring it out, Mom. That thing's valuable. It'd sell for a good price. My grip on the fork tightened. Daniel didn't notice my expression. If anything, his excitement only grew. Mom, do you even realize how much emeralds are worth right now? Their market price has skyrocketed. If I sell that bracelet and you and Dad chip in a little more, I can finally buy a house. Emily's family has been pressuring me about it. Once I get the place, we can get married. He grinned, his eyes gleaming with calculation. Her parents are professors, Mom. They're rich. I need to show them I'm serious. I listened to him talk, my fork absent-mindedly stabbing at my cake. The once perfectly shaped slice crumbled into pieces. Every word out of his mouth reeked of greed. Of entitlement. I barely recognized him. Lifting my head, I looked him straight in the eyes and asked, my voice soft, So, you didn't come back to celebrate my birthday. You came back for the bracelet. Daniel's smile faltered. Just for a second. Mom, how could you say that? I came all this way to celebrate with you and now you're doubting my intentions? I wouldn't have asked if I wasn't in a tough spot. Robert let out a low chuckle from the side. Helen, you're his mother. What's the point of hoarding things? Shouldn't you help your son? Why are you being so selfish? But it wasn't about the bracelet. It was about the person who gave it to me. That bracelet was the only gift I had ever received in my life. I was born into a family where daughters were nothing but burdens. In their eyes, I was an inconvenience, a mistake. I only survived because my grandmother would secretly ration her food and slip it to me when no one was watching. The night before she passed away, she must have sensed something. She pulled me aside, taking me up to the attic where she dug out a worn cloth pouch. Her frail, trembling hands pressed a vintage gold bracelet, set with an emerald, into my palm. She whispered, No one in this family will ever truly have your back. Hide this. One day you'll need it. She was the only person who had ever truly cared for me. Then I married Robert. And I knew I had nothing in this house. So I hid the bracelet away, deep in a flour tin in the kitchen. No one else ever stepped foot in there. Until today. I stared at Daniel, my voice barely a whisper. How did you find out about the bracelet? He shrugged nonchalantly as if it were nothing. I saw your chat history on your phone. He said it so casually, like it was his right to go through my personal belongings. His tone was light, even with a hint of mockery. Mom, what are you hiding? What's there between you and Dad that you can't talk about? Do you even care about this family? My heart sank. My eyes began to sting with the threat of tears. I spoke slowly, forcing myself to sound calm. I gave the bracelet to a friend for authentication. It wasn't a lie. I had discussed it with Liz. Daniel's face immediately darkened. His fists clenched, and without warning, he grabbed a cup from the table and threw it violently to the ground. What do you mean by that? You don't want to give it to me, is that it? I placed the fork down, my voice unwavering. Yes. The bracelet was no longer in my hands, but more importantly, I didn't want to give it to him. At 35 years old, this was the first time I had refused him. Fury overtook him. He flipped the entire table, the sound of crashing plates echoed through the room. The cake splattered onto the floor and wine soaked into the tablecloth. I shouldn't have come back to celebrate your birthday, he yelled. I treat you like a mother and you treat me like this? I didn't respond. My world was spinning and all I saw was the wreckage. Robert's voice cut through the chaos. Helen, what could you, a housewife, possibly need to spend money on? What's the big deal over a cheap bracelet? Daniel quickly followed up with a threat. Just tell me yes or no. Think carefully. I need this money now. If you don't help me today when you're old, don't expect me to take care of you. I won't give you a single cent. Robert sneered, mocking me. Did you hear that? A poor old woman with no retirement savings daring to argue with her son. They spoke like it was the truth, but was it really? I didn't have a retirement fund. When I married Robert, he told me, you don't need to work. I'll take care of you. Just manage the house and take care of the kids. I believed him. Back then, I naively thought it was a promise. But now I had no pension, no savings. I might even lose the right to claim Robert's Social Security benefits when he retired. Every time we fought, he would mock me mercilessly. If it weren't for me, you'd be a beggar by now, starving on the streets. And if I dared speak up, he'd always have a cold, cruel response. Women like you who stay home washing clothes and cooking meals are everywhere. I could easily trade you in for a younger woman. What man would want you after a divorce with a son to raise? And your son still needs to go to school. If you don't take care of him, I won't. So I endured. I endured until my son went to college, and then when I turned 40, I decided to look for a job. But a 40-year-old woman, what else could she do but wash dishes at a restaurant? The pay was pathetic, but I took it. I wanted my own insurance. I wanted a sense of security. I had always longed for my own retirement fund, something like Robert's steady Social Security income, so I wouldn't have to depend on anyone. So I started saving, planning to open an IRA, put some money aside for retirement. But just when I saved enough to open my account, Daniel called. Mom, we're taking a trip before we graduate. Everyone's going and I don't want to miss out. Can you help me with some money? I hesitated but told him I was planning to put that money into a retirement fund, to secure my future. He laughed on the other end of the line. Mom, you're saving for retirement? I'm about to graduate, and when I get a job I'll take care of you. You can spend as much as you want. I was touched. It wasn't about needing his money but just knowing he cared at least a little. So I sent the money, telling myself I'd save later. But the following year he called again. Mom, I'm thinking of going to law school. The tuition's expensive. Can you help me out again? I wavered once more, sending him the money. After all, there was still time. But year after year there was always something new. A new city to move to, a new certification to pay for, a government job application. Every time he'd say, Mom, this is the last time. But there was never a last time. This year I turned 60. The restaurant had stopped hiring me to wash dishes long ago. Young people worked faster, more efficiently. Me. I had long missed my chance to save for retirement. At that moment, standing there, I realized something. Daniel had completely forgotten the promise he made when he graduated, that he would take care of me. All that was left was a cold, indifferent threat. I won't give you a single cent. Tears welled up in my eyes. I looked down at my worn-out shoes, a size too small, chafing painfully against my heels. I had spent my entire life compromising, making sacrifices for them, but those sacrifices had never meant anything to them. I lifted my head, and for the first time in my life I spoke without hesitation. I want a divorce. I refuse to live like this anymore. Robert shot up from his chair, his face turning crimson. Say that again. You ungrateful old hag. I scold you a little and now you dare bring up divorce? Get the hell out of my house. I didn't hesitate. I turned and walked out the door. But where could I go? This house was Robert's. The bank accounts were in his name. Even my credit card was an extension of his. I had spent my entire life in this home, yet the moment I stepped outside I realized I had nowhere in this world that was truly mine. I had no choice but to call Liz. She picked up after a few rings. The moment she heard my hoarse voice, she fell silent for a few seconds before letting out a soft sigh. Helen, I was just about to call you. I'm getting a divorce. Do you want to leave with me? Liz and I met at a community college's senior education program. It was a new initiative and the first few classes were free. I had barely been to school in my life, so when I saw the course list, art appreciation, beginner's French, yoga, I couldn't help but feel a little excited. On the first day I signed up for a flower arrangement class. The professor talked about balance, flow, and visual harmony, but I couldn't understand a word. I sat stiffly in my seat, too afraid to touch the flowers in front of me, worried I'd ruin them. Liz was sitting beside me. She noticed my discomfort and smiled warmly, patiently explaining how to pair colors, how to trim the stems. She was elegant, like a heroine from a movie. There wasn't a single wrinkle on her face, and she smelled faintly of jasmine. Even her nails were neatly manicured. She looked my age, yet she seemed to live in a completely different world. Those were the happiest 3 days I had had in 60 years. After the trial period ended, Liz signed up for several long-term courses. I, however, didn't enroll in a single one. Because I couldn't afford it. I didn't dare ask Robert. He would never allow me to waste money on something so useless. In my eyes, Liz's life was perfect. She was a college professor, financially independent. Her husband was a corporate executive. She had a brilliant, loving daughter. She never had to bow her head to anyone. Never had to scrub the kitchen until her wrists ached. Never had to cry alone in the middle of the night. Even her name sounded beautiful, Elizabeth Sullivan. She told me her mother named her after her favorite novel. Elizabeth, a name that symbolized wisdom and independence. Me. My name was chosen at random the day I was born. So when Liz suddenly told me she was getting a divorce, I was more shocked than when Robert threw me out of the house. I arrived at the hotel Liz had mentioned. On the way there, I had rehearsed countless words of comfort in my head, to the point that I almost forgot my own heartbreak. But when I opened the door, I was met with Liz's smiling face. She was holding a small birthday cake, its candles still flickering. "Happy birthday, Helen." I froze. The cake was delicate and beautiful, something I had only ever seen in TV shows, the kind young girls would have for their birthdays. In that instant, I couldn't hold back anymore. My nose burned and I threw myself into Liz's arms, sobbing uncontrollably. I cried for a long time before I finally remembered to ask, "Wait, didn't you say you were getting a divorce? What happened?" Liz handed me a tissue, still looking relaxed, even at ease. If she hadn't just told me about her divorce, I would have thought this was all just an elaborate setup to surprise me. She said it so lightly, as if it were just another conversation. Michael's first love came back. I found out they've been having dinner and watching movies together every week. He's been cheating. I widened my eyes, stunned into silence. I had met Michael before. Every time Liz and I finished our classes, he would come pick her up. When the weather was cold, he'd bring her a jacket. To me, he had always seemed like the perfect husband. I struggled to find the right words to comfort her. What did people usually say when a man cheated? "All men are like this. As long as he comes home, it doesn't matter." But looking at Liz, I couldn't bring myself to say those words. So instead I blurted out, "Michael is a piece of shit." Liz let out a surprised laugh. "I thought you were going to tell me, at our age we should just tolerate it." I scratched my head, embarrassed. If it were anyone else, maybe I would have. Liz raised an eyebrow. "Then what about you? After everything they've put you through, don't you want to leave?" I stared at the cake in front of me, silent for a long time. Then finally I whispered, "Yes, I do." 60 years. I was exhausted. I wanted for once in my life to live for myself. Compared to Liz, my divorce was much simpler. Robert never believed I would actually leave. He thought I was just trying to make him yield, to force him to lower his pride. Even when the court summons arrived at the house, he still roared with a red face, "Fine. Divorce it is. Who's afraid of who? You useless old hag, don't come crawling back begging for a reunion, because I wouldn't take you back even if you did." It was Liz who encouraged me to file for divorce. Before, I never dared to. Partly because I thought at my age getting a divorce would be humiliating. And partly because I had nowhere to go. No income. Not even a place to sleep. The house was Robert's. The bank accounts were Robert's. The retirement fund was Robert's. I had nothing. If I left, how would I survive? But Liz told me I was wrong. She patiently explained, "Helen, even if he was the one making money, it's still marital property. You have the right to half of it." I had rights. I could take half. The words rang in my head like a thunderclap. When the court began investigating our assets, I learned the truth. Robert had far more money saved than he ever let on. He had been hiding nearly $250,000 from me. And yet, even while I worked odd jobs just to buy groceries, he had kept his grip tight on every penny. In the end, under a fair ruling, I was awarded $65,000. For the first time I realized I was worth something. When that divorce decree was placed in my hands, I felt as if a 1,000-pound weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I was no longer Robert's wife. No longer the woman who wasn't even allowed to celebrate her own birthday. As I walked out of the courthouse, I spotted Liz waiting at the entrance. Standing beside her was a young woman. I stopped in my tracks. "Emily." I turned to look at Daniel, and his face instantly lit up with joy. He rushed forward, nearly grabbing Emily's hands in excitement. "Emily, you came for me, didn't you? You regret breaking up, right?" Emily frowned and immediately yanked her hands away, her voice filled with disgust. "Came for you? Don't flatter yourself." Daniel froze, his ecstatic smile faltering for just a second. Emily's tone sharpened with anger. "After everything you lied about, you seriously think I'd come running back?" And just like that, everything clicked. The Emily that Daniel had been pining over all this time was Liz's daughter. As they argued, the full story came out. Daniel had lied to Emily about everything. He told her he was 28 when he was actually 35. He told her he was a government employee when he didn't even have a real job. He told her he had a villa when in reality the house he lived in wasn't even his. I had always wondered, why would a well-educated, successful woman like Emily ever fall for Daniel? Now I knew. It was all built on lies. Emily's eyes burned with disdain. "You really think I broke up with you just because your parents got divorced? Please. If you hadn't deceived me from the start, I wouldn't have even given you a second glance." Daniel's face turned an ugly shade of red. Grinding his teeth, he turned his fury on me, his eyes blazing. "So you divorced Dad? Fine. But why the hell did you have to ruin my chances too?" I looked him straight in the eyes and said word by word, "Do you even deserve marriage? If you hadn't lied, she wouldn't have looked at you twice." Daniel clenched his jaw, his breath coming in ragged huffs. He wanted to argue. But in the end he had no words. I turned away and walked toward Liz. Emily, standing beside her mother, gave me a small nod. There was a hint of gratitude in her eyes. Behind me, Daniel shouted, his voice dripping with rage. "Emily only looks down on me because I don't have money. But you just got $65,000 in the divorce. You owe me at least some of it. I'm your son. What, you think I'll take care of you in the future if you don't help me now? Keep dreaming." Robert chimed in coldly. "That's right. What, you actually plan to spend the money on yourself? You think it belongs to you?" I paused. Then slowly I turned around and met their eyes. Why shouldn't I spend it on myself? For 60 years I had always stepped aside for others. Not this time. I turned and walked out the doors. Behind me, Robert's voice erupted in fury, his composure finally cracking. "Helen, just wait and see. You'll regret this. You won't have a good ending." I didn't turn back. I just kept walking, leaving him with nothing but my back. The first thing I did after my divorce was walk into the Department of Public Records and apply for a name change. When I was born, my father had casually picked a name, Helen. It was as ordinary as a name could be. A name that faded into the background just like I had in my own life. As a child, teachers always remembered me last. At my younger brother's birthday parties, I was always the one carrying trays, never the one being celebrated. Helen was invisible. A presence so insignificant it was almost non-existent. But now, I refused to be invisible any longer. My marriage was over. I was no longer someone's wife, someone's mother, or the shadow of a man. I wanted to be me. When Liz found out I was changing my name, she was more excited than I was. She dug through history books, determined to find me the perfect name. In the end, she picked one. Eleanor. She smiled at me, her voice warm. Eleanor means wisdom, resilience, and independence. Your life starts today. I held the new ID in my hands, staring at the name printed on it. From this day forward, I am Eleanor. 2 weeks passed, but Liz's divorce wasn't going as smoothly as mine. Her husband, Michael, refused to let go. Even after she filed for divorce, he stood in court and insisted, "There has been no irreparable breakdown in our marriage." Under California law, if one party refuses a divorce, they must live separately for a year before the court can rule the marriage as irretrievably broken. I worried for her, but Liz didn't seem bothered at all. Instead, she spent her days happily browsing real estate listings from different cities, sending me dozens of links every morning. "Which city do you like best? Tell me and I'll buy a place there. We'll live together." I was taken aback. What about you? Where do you want to go? She simply smiled, the kind of smile that hinted at a life already fully lived. It doesn't really matter to me. I've been to almost every city in the US. Before finalizing the divorce, I went back to pack my things. There wasn't much to take. Everything that truly belonged to me could fit into a single suitcase. Maybe not even that. But as I sorted through the remnants of my life, I stumbled upon something unexpected. An old diary. I had completely forgotten I used to keep one. Flipping through the yellowed pages, I came across an entry from decades ago, written in careful, hopeful handwriting. Michael came to propose today. He said he couldn't give me the wedding I wanted yet. I told him it didn't matter. I'm just grateful to him, because now I can finally leave this house. I paused, my fingers tracing the inked words. So my marriage had been an escape all along. Another entry, the handwriting slightly messier, like I had been too excited to write properly. I can't believe Michael is moving to California for work. I never thought I'd leave this small town in my lifetime. I hope, one day I can see more of the world. I sat on the floor, flipping through the pages, feeling a strange mix of emotions. So once upon a time, I had truly wanted to marry Robert. And once upon a time, my biggest dream had been to travel, to see the world beyond my small, suffocating town. But somewhere along the way I had forgotten all of it. That night I told Liz, I don't want to settle down just yet. I spent the first half of my life stuck in that small town. Even when I moved to the city, my world still revolved around my husband and son. My world has always been too small. I want to see what's out there. A few days later, Liz called me, her voice brimming with excitement. Eleanor, I bought a camping van. Let's go on a road trip. Liz was always ahead of the curve. As we traveled, she taught me how to film videos and document our journey. She even helped me set up a social media account, The Runaway Diaries. Every day I recorded pieces of my new life. I never expected that someone like me would be adored by thousands of young people. They flooded the comments under my videos. You two are living the dream. Meanwhile, I'm stuck in my soul-crushing job. When I turn 60, I want to be just like you. Now this is what life should be. Restarting life at 60. I'm so jealous. I didn't always understand the slang they used, but I liked the phrase restarting life. Of course, not every restart was smooth. For example, Michael still refused to let go. He kept watching our videos, and every so often he'd send Liz flowers or even show up at our destinations, standing outside our hotel apologizing earnestly. He swore he'd cut off his first love, begged her for another chance. Liz didn't even spare him a glance. Then there was Daniel. He still called me. But he never asked how I was doing. Instead he asked, Mom, you must be making a lot of money from those videos, right? And then came the sob story. Dad's a mess without you. He forgets to take his blood pressure meds and now he's had a stroke. He's paralyzed. And what did that have to do with me? I hung up and blocked his number. Daniel wasn't wrong about one thing though. I was making money. A lot of money. A year ago, I never would have believed that I'd achieve financial freedom at 60. Life was funny that way. I had spent decades living like a servant, hesitant to even buy myself a nice dress. Now I was driving across the country in an RV, making more money than Robert had in his entire lifetime. If I had known back then that 60 was the real golden age of life, I never would have wasted my youth on them. In every city we visited, Emily, Liz's daughter, would send us local food recommendations and sightseeing spots. When she had time, she even flew out to join us. Or we'd video call her while sipping coffee, chatting about everything and nothing. One day I sighed, Liz, you're so lucky to have such a wonderful daughter. Emily grinned at me through the screen. Don't be jealous, Eleanor. I'm your daughter too. I paused, then laughed. A year passed in the blink of an eye. Michael finally gave in. Under Liz's persistence and Emily's firm insistence, he agreed to the divorce. That day we stood outside the courthouse, Liz holding the final papers. She exhaled deeply as if releasing the weight of decades of shackles. She turned to me suddenly and said, Eleanor, I've made a decision. I'm going abroad. I blinked. Where to? She smiled. France. I was surprised. She had met Michael in France. You're not still holding on to him, are you? I asked. Liz shook her head. Of course not. A soft glow filled her eyes. I just want to revisit my younger self. I studied in France for years, made so many friends. They're all in their 60s now too. If I don't go now, I might never see them again. I was happy for her. Then I hope you have an amazing time and reunite with everyone you want to see. Liz sighed. I thought you'd be upset. That you'd blame me for leaving you behind. I smiled gently. How could I? You were the one who taught me, once you've found yourself you'll never truly be abandoned. She laughed, her eyes glistening. Maybe you can visit me. Once you finish your road trip across the US, fly to France and visit an old friend. I nodded. Maybe I will. Then you better start learning French, Eleanor. Emily says I don't need to. As long as I know how to gesture, I'll be fine. France is full of Americans anyway. We looked at each other and burst into laughter. The journey continues. Life is still fresh and new,